Are Hamas terrorists or freedom fighters? The free world will tell you they are ruthless terrorists, just like ISIS, religious zealots that attack the innocent for religious and Islamist-type political narratives. Islamists, on the other hand, and their allies, mostly in the radical left, will tell you they are freedom fighters, seeking their humanitarian rights and to liberate their land. These two narratives are antithetical and cannot both be true at the same time. The predominant reason for Hamas actions on its core is either religious, either humanitarian, although it might translate to other categories. In this video, we try to answer the question, are Hamas terrorists or freedom fighters?
Ultimate, fearless, and are super genius. They didn't wear capes or star in Marvel movies or DC comic book series, but they can fly overseas. They can go deep without submarines. They can also build cities underneath. See, back in 1957, during the Vietnam War, tunnels were constructed by the Vietnamese. They covered an area of about 250 square kilometers and were called Cu Chi. But our heroes took it to the next level. Now focus. Everything next happened under siege. You see, Gaza is only 365 square kilometers, but our heroes built tunnels that extend over 500 kilometers, and that's a lot bigger than Tel Aviv. All of that was under siege. Yes, our heroes built a city bigger than their city with a shovel of steel. Not only that, their tunnels fit cars and go 80 meters deep. Not only that, they build their own rockets without any shipping fees, and sometimes a lighter can be a replacement indeed. Even the one who made them never stood up from his seat. Then came Ayyash al-Dayf al-Sinwar and made them bend on one knee. Our heroes are not the terrorists they want you to see. They are the same Palestinians we see daily on live TV. The 7th of October was not an attack as they made it seem. It was a response to what's been happening for 75 years. Some of our heroes lost a loved one or know someone that lost a loved one. Some lost a family. Some were arrested for no reason so they would lose their sanity. Some were beaten without humanity. They walk for miles to become stable financially and get daily inspections in their own home in reality. 70 massacres happened to their people casually, and 731 of their towns were stolen or ruined gradually. Some of them are orphans, some of them are displaced, but all of them, and I mean all of them, got their land stolen because some people said they were chosen. They are not the bad people as some might justify. Even their captives turn for a handshake and a goodbye. They don't want to spread terror in the world. They want their land back and for the people to rejoice. Like karma for Muhammad al-Durra and the fight scene for the name Shireen. They don't rape women as their oppressors claim. They burn cities to set them free. My heroes did not attack humanity on the 7th. They just told it that this is an occupation and no one can stand in the way of their liberation. Bring your armies, your billions, your machines, your rockets, or an F-16. They don't fear anything as long as they can say, Alif Lam Mim. If their occupier wants to erase their existence, our heroes will respond from zero distance. Long live the triangle, long live the resistance, long live Palestine, from the river to the sea.
So, this is in a nutshell the first narrative. Okay, first I will give you now the definition of terrorism. Terrorism is the indiscriminate attack, most often on civilians, by a non-state actor with the core or main purpose of advancing a political agenda using terror as the primary tool. Hamas are indiscriminately targeting civilians, including children, women, and elderly. They seek to maximize casualties on their own civilians, the Palestinians, so they can use that as propaganda for their purpose. Their purpose is obviously not to alleviate Palestinian suffering or fight for Palestinian human rights, quite the opposite. Their purpose is to establish a religious dictatorship before they established the caliphate, using Palestinian blood and tears along the way. They subscribe to the same ideology as known terrorists like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. In fact, they come from the exact same source, the Muslim Brotherhood. Whoever doubts what I just said is either naive and ignorant, like the radical left, or they are deceiving you, like often Islamists do. What I just said are the simplest facts of reality. Given what I just said, Hamas are clear-cut terrorists, the definition of terrorist. Their main objective is not liberation, is the subjugation of Palestinians and the destruction of Israel. Although they won an election initially, they then killed their political opponents and they never made a second election. Therefore, they are not a state actor. They instigate horror movie atrocities, ISIS-style atrocities on civilians, including children, elderly, and women. So indiscriminately, not only they target civilians, not only Israelis, but their own civilians, using them as human shields. They are driven by the same ideology, exactly the same, okay, as Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And they come from the same source, from the Muslim Brotherhood. So they are brothers with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. So unless you will say that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are not terrorists, Hamas must be also terrorists.
But it's interesting. I mean, Remembrance Day. I mean, I don't know what your poppy is for a start, Robert. Why haven't got you poppy on? And absolute disgrace.
I know. What can I say? There is a type of poppy which we're going to discuss, which I might wear. It's a Palestine poppy, which is the right wing very much so. But
the Remembrance Day itself is interesting, isn't it? Because obviously, no one really knows what it's all about now, and they just associate it with the right wing. It's supposed to commemorate the First and Second World Wars, the First World War in particular. And I think Muslims, we need to know our history, because the First World War, there's nothing to be happy about or commemorate in terms of us, apart from disaster. I mean, literally, the First World War was probably the biggest disaster for the Muslim world since the Mongol invasions, like 900 years previously, because it led to the basically the destruction of the Caliphate, which has existed since Rasulullah in Medina, which was a shade for the Muslims, which was the superpower, the world superpower for all those years. And it also led to the occupation of Palestine by the British and subsequently to the creation of Israel. So literally World War I was an absolute disaster for us. Unfortunately, lots of Muslims fought in those wars for colonial powers because so many of our nations were colonized by the British. And you probably hundreds of thousands of Muslims, if not more, died in those wars, ultimately for colonial powers. They shouldn't have fought in those wars. My own granddad, who wasn't a Muslim, he died in that war, by the way, as well. He died in the Second World War, was blown up on a ship in the Mediterranean, fighting for the British. And I say clearly that my granddad and other people, they died in vain in those wars, because they were wars between basically the powers of Kufr, between the major colonial secular Western powers who had empires. And unfortunately, Muslims got involved in those wars and they died in vain.
Yes.
These are the people who advocate the pro-Palestinian March on Remembrance Day, literally World War I, enemies of Britain. Attempting to hijack the day is commemorated to recognize British World War I heroes. The same people who call the dismantle of Islamic colonialism as a great tragedy and call the introduction of nation-states like Israel after the dismantle of the Ottoman Empire colonialism. Should Britain allow Islamic colonialist and terrorist sympathizers hijack their national day?
As Muslims, we've been saying for decades that terrorism has nothing to do with Islam. Unfortunately, in response, we've been accused of being dishonest about the true teachings of Islam.
But before we get to that, Robert, I mean, do you condemn Hamas?
Do you condemn Hamas?
No, do you? Are you a terrorist?
Condemn Hamas?
No, you're a terrorist.
No, you're a terrorist. You are a terrorist, and I know so because everyone's been telling me so.
I don't condemn Hamas. It's not obligatory to condemn Hamas. I condemn Israel.
MashaAllah. Solidarity welcomed. Ceasefire would bring much-needed aim. Armies to Aqsa and armies to Gaza would rescue those subjected to genocide and occupation.
Wow, what an interesting way to put that. Ceasefire would bring much-needed alleviation of suffering for Palestinians? No. Much-needed peace? No. Much-needed aim. And then he continues, armies to Aqsa, armies to Gaza. Islamists don't care about Palestinian suffering, in fact, orchestrate and anticipate Palestinian suffering. To unite the Muslim Ummah under a false humanitarian and liberation pretext against a common enemy and bring the caliphate. They orchestrate and then use Palestinian blood and tears to advance their political agenda. Islamists care for Palestinians as much as Hitler cared for Germans. Okay. They are in fact the only people that don't give a rat's backside about Palestinians. The rest of the world cares for Palestinians.
Hamas is intentionally destroying any chance for future peace. You know, the reason this attack was launched now, the reason for the timing of the attack was that Israel was very close to signing a historical peace treaty with Saudi Arabia, which was supposed not just to normalize relations between Israel and the Arab world, but also to restart the Israeli-Palestinian peace process and to include concessions that will alleviate the suffering of millions of Palestinians in the occupied territories. And the aim of Hamas was to foil this peace treaty.
What the Mujahideen from Gaza did. They have done something which we are pleased with.
Alhamdulillah.
Which part of Israel is occupied Palestine? All of Israel. There we go. There we go. There we go. So what you're calling for is the obliteration of the state of Israel, and all of this is just a cover for that. I appreciate your time. I'm just going to ask you the last question, the same question I asked her. Which part of Palestine is occupied?
The entirety of Palestine, but I'm not calling for the destruction of Jews.
I appreciate you expressing your full genocidal intent for the Jewish people living between the river and the sea.
Why is it genocidal to call for a state that is not?
The occupation of Palestine.
The whole thing, right? Just to be clear?
The entirety of Palestine.
Thank you.
You may accuse me of genocide if you wish. That is not my position.
Sure, and I will, but go ahead.
That you have phrased constantly and consistently, and it's quite a popular Zionist talking point, is the fact that the Arabs have rejected peace every time it was offered to them. Now, I would like, of course, there's been multiple times where peace has been offered, so let's discuss some of them. You have lied multiple times. I can continue if you would wish, but I would like to ask you the question, when you lie, do you feel shame?
Okay, so on the table, the Jews accepted it, the Arabs rejected it, so you did not actually undermine my case.
In his diary,
there should be no deal in the first place.
In his diary states...
Hold on. I listened to your whole bullshit history for like 5 minutes here, so at least let me respond to it. Your entire claim is that the Arabs did not reject peace, and then in your own disquisition, you admitted that the Arabs rejected the Peel Commission plan, which was a separation between the Jews and the Arabs, which gave an extraordinary amount of land to the Arabs. The Arabs then rejected the peace partition plan proposed by the United Nations in 1947. They then proceeded to reject the Oslo Accords in 93. After that, they rejected the Wye River Accords in 98. They rejected Ehud Barak's very generous offer in 2000. They rejected Olmert's very generous offer in 2008. Every single peace deal that has been proposed by Israel or anyone else has been rejected by the Arabs for a very simple reason, which was the very first question I asked you. You do not accept that there should be a Jewish state anywhere in this region. So as long as that's the case, there's literally nothing to argue about. You cannot simultaneously maintain the position there should not be a Jewish state anywhere in the region and then tell me that I'm wrong when I say that the Arabs will not accept a two-state solution. You yourself say that there should not be a two-state solution.
Orders. And what you have to understand that this cannot be scapegoated on Hamas, because before Hamas's existence, this was still going on. This was going on before Israel's existence.
But do you believe in a two-state solution?
No, I believe in... Look, even Hamas was proposing a two-state solution.
But do you believe in it?
Look, there's advantages and disadvantages. This is different. Why are you stuttering?
Why stuttering?
I don't know. I mean, it's a difficult one. I'll be honest.
Could you imagine two states next to each other living in peace? Palestine, Israel.
Look, it's a possibility. I mean, as I say, even Hamas was saying that that's a possibility.
You are a liar. We don't need to pretend, oh, two-state solution. Do you think for me to say, I actually believe that the way in which Israel established itself in the first place is completely oppressive and illegitimate? You think that makes me an anti-Semite? Wallahi, if that makes me an anti-Semite, I'm happy to be labeled as such.
As I say, even Hamas was saying that that's a possibility.
You are a liar, and you are all liars.
Hamas accepts the possibility to gain more ground and further the assault on Israel.
That's really what's going on, isn't it?
Radical Islamists like Hamas and Mohammed Hijab historically sabotage a two-state solution and the prospect to alleviate Palestinian suffering because that will compromise the political cause of Allah in this world. Instead, they will orchestrate and use Palestinian suffering to advance their political agenda. Islamists like Mohammed Hijab will keep using the death and suffering of Palestinians to gain propaganda points over Israel. They will keep plan and capitalize Palestinian blood and tears for their imperialistic agenda.
Save Palestinians from Islamists, the only true enemy they ever had. The rest of the world wants and always wanted to help Palestinians.
Everything must be scapegoated to Hamas. Even before Hamas was an entity, the terrorism narrative was still in force by the Israelis against the secular PLO. This cannot and it will not fly anymore.
Look the outrageous idiocy of this buffoon. He says the attacks on 7th of October were scapegoated to Hamas. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? And in what type of world, you shameless buffoon, you want people to accept that 710 was scapegoated to Hamas? I mean,
I think that the Palestinians, in their attack on October 7th, this was really what they're trying to prevent. They're trying to prevent Saudi from normalizing at that key time by creating this situation for the purposes of blocking normalization between Israel and Saudi. And it worked, so far. It has delayed. It has put a huge wrench in the gears of Saudi-Israel normalization.
Have you ever wondered why Hamas and their supporters don't want to alleviate Palestinian suffering? Instead, orchestrate, anticipate, and try to maximize Palestinian suffering? The answer is they employ the Osama bin Laden plan to replace the Western world order with the Islamic world order, as described in the Muslim Brotherhood notebook. They seek Muslim suffering so they can unite the Muslim world under our false humanitarian and liberation pretext. Unless Islamists are defeated, there can never be a Palestinian solution. Unless Osama bin Laden's ideological offsprings are defeated, there will never be peace in this world.
18 years old, and let me tell you something, we do not condemn any resistance towards the liberation of Palestine. We ask for a liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. We condemn the loss of any innocent lives worldwide. But what is an innocent life? And what is the definition of a civilian? Are you talking about an illegal settler in an illegal occupation state? Is that a civilian for you? That's not the definition of a civilian. We are here asking and sending a clear message to all governments, to all people around the world. We are here asking for a full liberation of Palestine. Full liberation from the river to the sea.
Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea.
Palestine will be free.
Zionists are holding banners calling on Muslim armies to invade Israel while chanting, "Ceasefire now." Imagine being so self-unaware. You literally demand a war and a ceasefire at the same time.
What do we want?
Ceasefire!
What do we want?
Ceasefire!
What do we want?
Ceasefire!
When do we want it?
Now!
When do we want it? What do we want? Ceasefire. What do we want?
Ceasefire!
What do we want?
Ceasefire!
What?
Okay, so you want ceasefire. At the same time, you have a banner for the Muslim armies to invade Israel. I mean, this cognitive dissonance is exactly Islamist. This exactly. This is in in a nutshell, Islamism.
So when governments want to talk about a two-state solution, they can stick their two-state solution. We want a free Palestine, and we want the state of Israel dissolved. We want the state of Israel dissolved. We cannot give the state of Israel any type of legitimacy. This is settler colonialism what we're talking about. If the Israelis want to remain on the land, then you can become a Palestinian Jew. And if you don't like it, then leave.
We don't. But settlers aren't innocent. Settlers aren't innocent, and there's no peace on stolen land. When people are occupied, resistance is justified. And I'll say this. We saw them call for a ceasefire. But Mark Drakeford, our supposed leader, abstains. What lowlife, what absolute lowlife abstains from condemning genocide?
Look this idiot, what he says. He says, after declaring that you want to eliminate Israel, he then continues and says, what loony will abstain ceasefire? Let me tell you what loony. The one that doesn't want to be genocide by you. That is who. These guys. Okay, so that is in a nutshell the pro-Palestinian activist.
Popular Islamists on Twitter pretend the recent terrorist attacks on Israel is a humanitarian and an ethnic liberation issue. The truth is the same. Islamists openly admit they don't want a Palestinian state and they don't want any kind of compromise with Israel that might bring any sort of peaceful resolution for the Palestinians. They seek the complete eradication of the state of Israel in a type of religious empire's mindset.
As Muslims, brothers and sisters, we have to be very clear with these principles. And we have got one aim and one aim in mind only. That is the complete removal of the occupation and the removal of the Zionist entity. So I ask you, brothers and sisters, do we want to liberate Palestine? Do we want to remove the occupation? Inshallah. And the second thing, brothers and sisters, and may Allah reward all the brothers and sisters who are doing it out of sincerity. But today I am here as a Palestinian, and I want to show you something that is going to help us to move forward as an ummah. If we want to move forward as an ummah, the first thing that we need to do, brothers and sisters, is we need to take these flags, and we need to remember what these flags mean. We need to remember what they represent. And as a Palestinian, I'm telling you today, what we need to do is we need to take these flags and drop them. And this is the flag that we need to raise, my brothers and sisters. This is the flag that will unite us. This is the flag that will say we want to remove these borders, those superficial borders that don't mean nothing.
All they do is separate us. All they do is weaken us and disunite us. It is Islam that unites us. It is the Khilafah that strengthens us. And it is under La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah that we will become that dignified nation again.
Suck.